Chris, how you doing tonight?
Good, Grant. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Guys, we got Chris from Cane's Legacy. If you have Twitter, make sure you give this guy a follow. One of the best Miami Hurricane Twitter content out there, at Cane Legacy. Chris, man, how have you been, brother?
I'm doing great, man, especially tonight. I wasn't expecting to get news about Thad Franklin, so it kind of changed the whole perspective of the night for sure.
Oh, definitely. I was getting ready for the podcast, and then the Thad Franklin news dropped, and I was like, oh, man, now I got a whole different segment to input. So real quick, go ahead and let the people know, because I think you have unique content on Twitter. So go ahead and tell the people about how you run your Twitter and the type of content that you put out.
Well, I guess to talk about it, I first got the idea about doing it, and I actually do it with a good friend of mine too, who's also a big Canes fan. There used to be this every year there was always this countdown of 100 days to Canes football. So here's all these guys number 99, here was a great 99 and all that. And after a while, it kind of started to filter out, and I was like, that's the kind of stuff that people need to see. The young guys got to see all that old stuff coming back. So one of the things that we like to do is compare the past, the present, and the future, and bring it all together. So and Thad Franklin actually does a great job, or he's a good candidate for that kind of stuff, because you can compare him to some of those Miami greats so easily. Like we did before, we put up a Najee Davenport comparison that, if you saw Najee in high school, that's the guy. That's the exact comparison we want to run with.
Okay, so let's go into that. What makes you compare him to Najee Davenport?
Well, he's such a unique kind of back for Miami, because, Miami always has, you think Miami, you think speed, right? You think break tackles, you think all that. But to have a dude who's so physical and so strong with the lower body and all that, that's something that, Najee had. And Najee, being a selfless dude, he was a captain at Miami, even though he technically, you could say, played fullback. He's a guy who, early on in his career was kind of taking whatever he could get in some of these plays. And he's the kind of guy that, in terms of leadership ability, I think Thad Franklin has with the success that team has had and the maturity he seems to show. But also, he goes out there and he hurts people. He puts people on the ground play after play after play after play. And that's the kind of guy Najee was.
Yeah, speaking of his character and the type of person he is, I've watched several interviews of Thad Franklin. In every interview I've watched, he gave credit to his teammates, to the offensive line. And that's not something you see nowadays, especially with the running back as high caliber as him. 247 has him ranked as a 4-star. To me, he looks like a 5-star. And to me, the best running back in Florida, would you say?
Of all the guys I've seen so far, he's got to be up there. If not the best, certainly up there with the highest ranks of them. Of course, now that he recommitted to Miami, they'll probably drop him to a 3-star, because that's the Miami tax that we always get hit with. So I guess we'll see. But he's definitely an elite player.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I used to fight that theory. I used to be like, man, you guys we're just being homers. That's what I used to say. But it happens time after time. A player, it happened to Don Chaney, and he didn't even play or anything. It was just like, we're dropping him. Why are you dropping him? We don't know.
That's the one. That's the one where even up until recently, it's kind of like a joke on the message boards and Twitter and all that. You drop Chaney, something's wrong.
I agree. So you want to look at early, the 2021 class, Miami's ranked number 5. Of course, it's a long way to go. 9 commits, Thad Franklin, Baby Seymour, Savon Collins, Kamon Matire, if I'm saying that right, Hammett, Tyler Johnson, Tim Burns Jr., and a couple more, all guys from Florida. So Manny and the guys, they're doing a good job of working in Florida. Who do you think's our best recruiter on staff?
It's hard to vote against Hickson after what he just did, honestly, with the way he was able to pull that off. And I know Rumpf gets a lot of trouble because he missed on heritage guys and all that, but Rumpf finds those dudes who can come in and play, and now he's getting guys that have that kind of Miami speed, and I'm expecting them to come up and play really well. Especially late, going out and getting Dunson and having Marcus Clark signed up for so long. He's kind of underrated. He sneaks around a little bit, and then you kind of forget how good he is. Then, of course, everyone always talks about Stephen Field as being a guy who kind of pitches in wherever he can. And he's got Khalil Brantley for next year, too, a dude who's only going to get better the more he fills into that body.
All right, so I'm gonna put the pressure on you. So give me your top 3 recruiters on this current Miami staff.
I'll go Hickson. Hickson number 1, based upon what he's been able to do with the running backs. I mean, to get 2 blue chip, elite guys that in a lot of people's minds are 5 stars. That's proof is in the pudding kind of a deal. He goes 1. I'll go Stephen Field 2, and for position coaches, honestly, if I really had to pick a third guy, like I don't think you could push Manny Diaz out of this thing, because I mean he's the closer, he's the salesman, he's the guy that goes into the house and says, hey, look, you're going to be a hurricane. Here's when we're going to go beat people up and do all this, and it's hard to do when you go 6 and 7. So the fact that he was able to do it with all these guys over the past couple of months, like Avante especially, Manny knows what he's talking about when he goes in that living room for sure.
That's facts, guys. We got Chris from Cane's Legacy. Follow the Twitter account Cane's Legacy, especially if you love Miami Hurricanes football, the past, the present, the future. Chris, so what's your biggest gripe with Manny? I think we all have our different gripes, positive and negatives. So in your opinion, what's your biggest gripe with what Manny has done so far? Do you have any gripes?
Well, off-season wise, he seemed to do everything right. The big issue with Rick was that he wasn't doing the things in the off-season to make everything better. To improve the whole team, top to bottom. Manny cut the offensive staff last year. Manny brought a lot of stuff in this year to make it all better. I think during the season, though, you saw early on in the year that there was a clear lack of experience from him. Issues even in the Florida game, obviously, like that's one that stands out to me with time of possession and not getting the ball put in well quick enough, and all these little things that you figure an experienced coach with an experienced staff wouldn't have done. And I think a big issue was that he put a lot on Enos, and when he didn't really have that kind of leadership ability that Manny could learn from, it kind of fell behind, which is why I think you see so many guys on the offensive side with all OC experience now, all assistant coaches, because I think he said, I need more guys that know what they're doing and have been here before to help me run this ship.
I agree. What are some things that you like that Manny has done?
I think it's the energy. It's the number one thing is the energy. I mean, it's Miami fan base. We just look for any little, you give us like the tiniest little bit of a gap, and we'll say, okay, now we're going to go win the net. Like, we don't need a lot. We just need you to give us that energy, and we'll come follow you. I think going 6 and 7 and getting the fan base back, like he obviously has, pulling in the transfers, getting them to buy in. Well, that's what makes us buy in. So as negative as Cane fans can be when we're losing to FIU and all that, a couple months later, we're right back in the fire of it, looking at 10-win seasons and starting to find like how we're going to get to the ACC title game, take all that kind of stuff.
And I think part of that is in the competition that we've played these last couple years. I mean, the Coastal's the worst it's been since I've watched football. So I see where Miami fans are. I know how I feel. I feel like when you compare the rosters that we have compared to Pittsburgh to Duke, who's beat us back-to-back years, we shouldn't be losing these games. I mean, just look at how many invites we got to the college compound. So I think that's where Miami fans are at, is we have the talent. We should be winning the Coastal, but if we're not, then why aren't we winning the Coastal?
Yeah, and a lot of that is, player development. Like you said about the combine, all these guys go to the combine, but, you can make your comments about Shaq and Pinckney playing at linebacker, and like maybe they didn't get to where we expected them to when we saw them as freshmen. There's a lot of comments about, well, it looked like maybe he should have been better, it should have been this. If we get the most out of these guys we have on the roster, like all these stars, I mean, I know stars only matter when you step on and put the uniform on, but still at the same time, we remember how they played in high school. So if some of these guys start to step up and like the coaches can get the most out of them, we got to win these games for sure.
Does the transfer portal, what are your thoughts on the transfer portal? Do you think it's hurting college football?
No, honestly, I don't, and I'm not. I'm not saying it as Miami Hurricanes fan who's benefited greatly from the portal. I'm saying it as someone who wants these kids to get an